Hi and welcome to this video where I'll be coloring a page from Seasons by Hanna Karlzon. Specifically this one, the start of the winter section in this book. If you're new to this channel, hi, my name is Ina. If not, welcome back. Last month I colored in the book Timeless Beauty Special from Coloring Heaven. And I really like the color combination I used for the background. The mix of turquoise, purple and pink, combined with silver. That's why I want to use these colors again for this page. I'll be using soft pastels for the background for this, but later on. If I did it now, I would have to erase everything around the edges. And if there's already a layer of colored pencil, the soft pastels won't adhere properly, which saves me from having to erase anything from the motif. I'll start with these crystals. Since I want the background colors to be reflected in the crystals, I'm using similar shades. I'll begin with mauve, using my Castle Art Soft Touch pencils. Of course, you can use any pencil you have if you want to follow along. I'm just randomly coloring parts of the crystals in mauve, which means I also add some light violet in the background later. I'm not pressing hard, just very lightly. Next, I'll use lavender light to create some soft transitions. The third color in this combination is azalea pink. Where it fits, I leave some white spaces. The other halves of the crystals will be more bluish turquoise. For this, I'm using a combination of cerulean blue middle, cobalt turquoise and cobalt turquoise green. Here as well, I leave some areas white. Now I'm using a light yellow to add a subtle glow from the candle, just along the upper edges. Then I use white to fill in the remaining areas. This prevents the soft pastels from sticking there later and also helps to blend everything beautifully. Since the violet in these crystals is mainly at the top, this means that the background above these crystals will be violet, and below it will be more turquoise blue, with a bit of violet again here. This is meant to reflect the background a little bit. At the very end, I plan to make the lines white. I will do the same with the icicles. Since I've now made this one violet and the gradient moves towards pink, it means that the background here will be more pink and then become more bluish further down. I would like to make the snowflakes silver and the stars gold. However, since I'm not sure how I want to color them inside, whether to use some of the colors I've already used or different ones, I thought I would start with the candle first and then color this little bottle. This way I get a better impression of the other colors I'll be using. I start with yellow and color the flame. And since fire is always brightest in the middle, I'm doing that here as well, using lemon yellow light. Now I use this yellow to add some light edges on the candle and on the little bottle. Next, I continue with the candle, which I color in magenta pink. Alright, let's continue with this little bottle in purple tones. To make the bottle appear round, I darken the edges and lighten it towards the center, except for this light streak illuminated by the candle. To achieve the smoothest gradient possible, I repeatedly go over the darker color with the lighter one. And at the end, I'm using white to blend the colors properly, so that no white from the paper shows through, or at least less so. I want the bottle's cap to look like a crystal, so I'll apply the same technique I used for the other crystals below, simply coloring in various color gradients. Next, I'll move on to the snowflakes. They will later be silver, and for that I want to use a silver metallic watercolor. However, to make it more visible, I'm coloring the snowflakes gray, because the watercolor isn't opaque. It gives more of a silver shimmer. I'm using different shades of gray and white to create a slight gradient, so they don't look too flat. Here too, I go over the darker areas with a lighter color, and then blend everything with white. Later, as mentioned, a metallic watercolor will be applied on top. If you have a metallic paint that's opaque even in a thin layer and you want to use that, you can of course skip this step. I do the same with the stars now. Again, not coloring the entire stars, just partially. This will also help me decide which color I want to use for the inside of the stars. The small stars will be completely colored in dark yellow, since you won't really see much of a gradient there. Now the question is, how should I do the tail of this big star? I'm thinking of starting with light pink and then transitioning to yellow. Alright, let's continue with the insides of the stars and snowflakes. For the snowflakes, I use shades of blue, and for the stars, shades of pink. I might also add some purple to both the stars and the snowflakes, if I need more color variety. I'm trying to create some variation by starting the gradient from the outside in some cases and from the inside in others. The beds along the edge will also be pink. I'll finish the remaining details later with a gel pen. For now, I'll work on the background, as mentioned earlier, using soft pastels. Unfortunately, they don't have a name on them, as they are older ones. I'll be using this turquoise, this pink, and this purple. To protect the other pages, I'll place a scrap sheet here and behind the page. So, now I have this pink reflection. So I'll add some pink here. But I just realized I have the light here. I will now add a bit of yellow around the flame. Then there's the pink reflection here and down here, and a bit of turquoise at the bottom. I will first spread the soft pastels before the pigment starts sliding around too much. I like to use a piece of a makeup sponge for this. By the way, I have a separate sponge for each color family to avoid accidentally mixing colors with a dirty sponge. Now I'll just continue in the same way, spreading the colors a bit on the side. I'll first roughly distribute the color and later add another layer or check where there are still gaps. Since it's a bit tricky in the middle of the book, because the color would slip into the center between the pages, I've simply placed some pigment on my scrap paper. This allows me to pick it up nicely from there and spread it on my page. I found out that when I fix a page with a fixative and have used pink and purple colored pencils, they tend to bleed through. That's why I've created a rough template from the scrap paper, which I place on top while spraying, hoping that the pink won't bleed through. And I hope the paper will be enough protection. In any case, I'll spray the page with a fixative now. I always do this outside because I don't want to inhale the fumes. Finally, I will add the details with gel pens and metallic watercolors, as they adhere better to the workable fixative than if I applied them directly on the colored pencils. The surface is a bit rougher after fixing. So I've now fixed the page, and as you can see, nothing has bled through, even though the scrap piece of paper was blown away briefly by the spray. I'll start with the gel pens now, using my gel pen box from Avec. I'm using this golden metallic pen, first for the ring and then for the string and the small details on the bottle. Although I fixed the soft pastels, I'm still using a piece of paper to avoid smudging. Basically, I would say that the soft pastels apply better on the paper from, for example, the Coloring Heaven book. The paper in Seasons, at least in my Dutch edition, is noticeably smoother. As a result, the pastels appear a bit patchy here, and I feel like I can apply more color to the other paper. However, this is my first time using soft pastels in Seasons, and I might not do that again in the future. Or probably I could try another layer after fixing. I have decided to make the ribbon silver after all. And yes, I had colored it slightly yellow in the front to reflect the light. But since the gel pen is opaque, it won't be visible anymore. This is more of an anthracite silver, relatively dark, which I thought would suit the string better than a very bright silver. I also want to make all these dots and reflections white, but I'm still unsure whether to use a gel pen or a Posca marker. So for now I proceed with a metallic paint, using this watercolor from Nassau and finding a small brush. I start at the top, using this gold here. I will add just 2 drops of water from the water tank brush and use a very small fine brush for painting. Since the surface is slightly rough from the fixative, the color sticks much better on the colored pencils. Without the fixative, the smooth surface of the colored pencils would cause the color to shrink. The silver next to the gold is too dark for my liking, so I'm using this lighter shade for the snowflakes. It's from the same brand, and since this color is simply light and shimmery, I'm covering the entire snowflake with it. Now I'm starting with a jelly roll from Sakura, and I'll see if I stick with it or switch to the Posca marker. First, I'm adding highlights to the beds. Then I'm beginning to trace the lines of these icicles. But I don't like how it looks. They almost disappear. I've mentioned in another video before that I often like to cover lines, but then I don't end up liking it. With a darker background and white lines, it probably would have looked great. But since the background is as light as the icicles, you wouldn't be able to see them clearly. So I'm leaving the lines black and scraping off the color. Alright, I continue with the dots for now. For the crystals, I just add a few white highlight lines instead of tracing all the lines, as I didn't really like that with the icicles. The crystals probably wouldn't blend with the background as much as the icicles. But if I draw some lines in white and leave others as they are, it would look odd. So I leave them as they are. I'm now tracing the lines of the one icicle with the black stabilo. And with that, the page is finished for me. I show you the gold and silver shine and shimmer up close. I hope you enjoyed the video. Bye!